Good morning, class. Here I am, your favorite biology teacher. We're on a little nature walk this morning. But don't worry, I'm doing a little driving around, but I'm going to self-isolate in my car and I won't talk to anybody today. What we're going to be talking about today is succession. Look what we got here. Just regular old dirt. You see this field behind me? Used to be desert. Now, of course, it's not going to go back to desert anytime soon because we got a farmer that's farming it. But what would happen if a farmer stopped farming it for a long period of time? That's what we're going to be talking about today, succession. What's going to happen to this place right here if nobody takes care of it? So stay tuned. When we talk about succession, there are two types of succession. If you did your reading, you know what I'm talking about. There's primary succession and there's secondary succession. Primary succession begins with rock. The rock gets worn down. It gets worn down by various ways. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But there's secondary succession. We're going to spend some time today talking about secondary succession also. Secondary succession starts when we already have the soil created. Now this soil right here in the Imperial Valley at one time was probably rock. If you look on a map, get yourself a map and look on a map. Find the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon's not just in Arizona. The Grand Canyon is a huge area. It goes all the way up into Utah and Colorado. All that canyon of the Grand Canyon used to be rock. All that rock got worn down into dirt, sand, silt. It was carried by the Colorado River to the Imperial Valley. And that's where this dirt came from, or rather most of it came from. So it was rock at one time and became soil. Now the soil's been disturbed, and the climax community, which we're going to be looking for today, was disrupted. Of course, it's a pretty good deal for us. We grow a lot of good food here in the Imperial Valley, good crops on this good soil. But what would happen again if it wasn't taken care of? That's our adventure today. The first step in succession is pioneer species. And that's what we have right here. You might call them weeds. They're usually annuals. They grow rapidly and then they die and they reseed. The pioneers are the first plants to show up after some type of disruption has taken place. And if you study those pages in the book, you'll find out it could be fire, it could be some kind of other catastrophe. But obviously, this area right here was disturbed by farming efforts, and we have our pioneer species starting to come back. What they do is they prepare the soil for the next generation of plants, which would be some little shrubs like this one here, or like this one here. This whole area right here is primarily pioneering species of plants. And in this area, we'll have less diversity of animals. You have less diversity of plants, you'll have less diversity of animals. You might find some animals that travel through this area, like the coyote or the bobcat, but most animals are going to look for a more complex area to live in. Here's another shot at the pioneer species. You can see they just started growing in this area. The next step, we have all these pioneers in here, and believe it or not, they do prepare the soil for the next generation. And then we have these bushes that we saw down there grow into larger bushes. These all around are right here. Most of them are creosote bushes. Yeah, this is quite a large one. You can see it's flowering out right now. So, what's going to be the climax community? We'll just go on a little bit further and find out. We got this large rabbit bush here, and a big giant creosote bush next to it. So as you watch the video, you can see succession going from the pioneer, from bare dirt to the pioneer plants to the larger bushes and shrubs and to this large bush right here. This thing is, turn this camera around. See, I'm 6'3". Look how much taller than me this plant is right here. So we're getting, our plants are going from little bitty tiny short annuals that are going to grow maybe a foot and a half tall. They're going to die seasonally. And then we have the smaller shrubs, and now we have this giant thing here. In this area right here, you can see all these pioneer species in here. Now the pioneer species era or time for a area when it's going through succession might last a long time. This area right here, I wanted to show you this area right here because back in the 1950s and onward, this was the old beach line. If you saw the other video, a nature walk in southwestern United States desert, you would realize that this area out here used to be a sloping beach line that came up like this. You can see it's all been disturbed. What they did was they came in, because the beach line, there's a lot of perfect little gravel rocks. You can see a few right here in this area, these little rocks, perfect for gravel, perfect for making concrete. So this whole area was mined basically for gravel. This was an old gravel pit. And they used this area, they just took this whole area and got all the gravel rock out of it. And what they use it for the sidewalks, the roads, the buildings, and the Imperial Valley. Nevertheless, a different type of disruption here. Not farming, like out where we were, but this here was a man-made area here that was created when the area was mined for gravel. But you can see the pioneer species coming back in, and then we have the next generation, these little shrubs right in here that are starting to grow. Or in another area, you can notice that we have the pioneer species underneath, but we have quite a few shrubs underneath, and the plants are getting larger and more clustered together. And look what we found right here. What the heck is this thing? It looks kind of like a bomb, doesn't it? It's got the fins down here on the end. It's got a long pipe. It's got a point on it. This is actually a practice bomb from World War II that we find out in this area. You notice it's got a lead tip on it. It's filled with lead. All it is a pipe with lead in it and a couple of fins on it. Here's where it was attached to the aircraft, and the fins down here are all rusted off. Why is that important? That's important because it dates this area. We know that this area here was disrupted. This was a gravel pit area previous to World War II, 1940 or 1945. Otherwise, this would not still be out here. This would have been consumed and pulled up by the tractors and things like that. So this area here, you can see, has much, much more thick. It's had longer time. It's had since 1940 or 1945. We're figuring 80 years to start to grow back. And in the distance, right over here, right over there, you can see the top of a mesquite tree. So we've gone from bare dirt at the very beginning to smaller shrubs to the mesquite tree back there behind me. Let's go take a look at that. There's our mesquite tree. And if we look over here, there's one that's even larger. So what is a climax community for the Imperial Valley? Mesquite forest, if you wanted to call it that, or mesquite scrub. You notice also that in the climax community, we have stratification or layers. We have the large mesquite tree, which must be about 20 feet tall. And we have the next layer. We have the next layer. We have the next layer. And then we have the little short layer right down here at the bottom, the annuals. Our nature walk this morning is almost over. One last look. Some people would call this the Sonoran Desert or the Colorado River Basin Desert area. We'll just call it the climax community for the Imperial Valley. And we've seen it change from just bare dirt to this community right here. And the climax plants, of course, are the mesquite trees and these large creosote bushes. Going back to our very first stop at the barren field, you'll recall, at our very first stop, you'll recall there weren't any plants there, and there weren't any animals there. Plants, the flora, determine the animals, the fauna. In this area that we're in right now, is much more complex. We found signs of insects, spiders, lizards, rabbits, fox, coyote, bobcat, all in this area. It's a much more complex area because it is the climax community. I hope you enjoyed our little visit to the desert this morning. If you've ever wondered what the Imperial Valley looked like before the first farmer stuck his shovel in the dirt, that's it right there. You guys take care. I promised you that we would talk about these hummocks or these hills on the east desert. You can see they're all in a line out here. All in a line, just like this. When we talk about this area of the desert right here, we have to understand when we talk about climax communities that this wasn't always a desert. This at one time was a beach. And what would the climate been like at a beach in the Imperial Valley? One of the things we learned from our nature walk today, if this was a beach at one time, then the climate was different. The climate is constantly changing. It's controlled mostly by our friendly sun up there in the sky. Well, class, that wraps up our succession nature walk. The climax community is the community that will stay there permanently unless something happens to change it, such as farming, mining for gravel, a fire, like a forest fire, a flood, or any kind of catastrophe that could cause it to change. In our nature walk this morning, we saw from bare ground all the way up to this very diverse climax community of the desert. I hope you enjoyed the trip. I did. I'll see you guys later. Take care.